Good morning and welcome. I'm Jessica Engelke, the mayor of the city of North Bend and the president of the League of Oregon Cities. Welcome to today's press conference, which kicks off the League's City Day at the Capitol event. During this year's City Day event, local government officials from across Oregon will be focusing with their advocacy efforts on the following key priorities: infrastructure and housing, transient lodging tax flexibility, time, place, and manner for public camping, and transportation funding. Here with me this morning to provide details on these four key priorities are Bend Mayor Melanie Keebler, Toledo Mayor Rod Cross, and Fossil Mayor Carol McInnes. Before we begin with presentations from our local government leaders, please know that the League of Oregon Cities policy priorities are created by its 241 member cities. Every even-numbered year, 7 member-driven policy committees meet over several months to determine what policy issues matters most to cities. Once the policy committees identify their key issues, those issues are placed on a ballot that is sent to each city in Oregon for review. City councils across the state review the ballot and rank their top priorities. Ballots are then returned to the LOC office, where staff tabulates the results and presents the results to the LOC Board of Directors. The Board of Directors reviews the results and formally adopts, reserving the right to make amendments, the policy priorities for the organization. In 2024, 28 policy priorities were placed on the ballot, with 9 issues being designated as key top priorities for the organization. During today's press conference and throughout today's event, 4 of those 9 priorities will be our primary focus. For today's press conference, the 3 local leaders will give remarks one at a time. Each will give prepared remarks on a particular policy priority. Once all the elected officials have finished their remarks, we'll have a short, facilitated question and answer session. Please know that also with us today are members of the LOC staff, several whom have technical expertise in the subject areas being discussed today. They may be called upon at times to assist us in answering questions that they are asked. When we get to the question and answer portion, we will call on those media members who have pre-submitted a question first. And once all of those have been asked and answered, assuming that time allows, I'll then pivot to taking any additional questions. Thank you again for being here today. As we begin the press conference, it is my privilege to introduce Bend Mayor Melanie Keebler. In addition to serving the residents and businesses of Bend, Mayor Keebler is a member of the LOC Board of Directors. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about infrastructure and housing. Investing in community infrastructure and housing is one of the League's top priorities for this session. Housing that's accessible to our communities and the infrastructure to support it is the foundation of thriving cities and communities. And without strong investments in water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure, it's very difficult for cities to support the housing development that we know our state desperately needs. So last year, we want to commend the legislature for investing nearly $100 million in infrastructure projects for needed housing. That was a good start. We appreciate this work and we want to see those investments continued. The connection between infrastructure and housing cannot be overstated. Oregon needs to build 36,000 homes a year to meet the needs of Oregonians. And we need continued state investment to make that happen at the city level, not only to build the infrastructure, but also to preserve a range of housing options, including affordable and workforce housing. What this looks like in my city is the need for a couple of really big sewer pipes. And if you've ever been to Bend, you know that our ground is lava rock, so that gets pretty expensive. We've got 2 projects, a central sewer interceptor and a southeast sewer interceptor that total $66 million together. We would love to have help with a part of that from the state to make sure that we can actually build those in a timely fashion. and that we're not putting the cost of that infrastructure on the backs of ratepayers who are already struggling and the folks who are building housing. If we can unlock the Southeast area, for example, where we have lots of different property owners, none of whom can by themselves bear the cost of one big pipe, we could create over 1,200 homes and over almost 3,000 jobs, 2,800 jobs in that area. That's a planned, complete neighborhood for our city. So these new homes that we know that we need and want to plan for, they need that surrounding infrastructure. And all of our communities require stable, sustainable infrastructure systems that will ensure public health, safety, and economic development. So that's why LOC is advocating for this comprehensive infrastructure and housing package from the state, recognizing that critical link between these two priorities. With the state support, cities can make that investment necessary to address our demands on our infrastructure and unlock the potential for faster housing development across Oregon. So we call on the legislature to prioritize funding for water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure alongside strong investments in housing development and preservation. Together, we can fund infrastructure and build the homes we need in our communities. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Keebler. I'm Mayor Rod Cross from the city of Toledo. 20 years ago, the state passed a preemption on local transient lodging taxes that established restrictions around how local lodging tax dollars could be spent, requiring at least 70% to go toward tourism promotion and tourism-related facilities and reserving the remaining 30% for local discretionary spending. These taxes are primarily on hotels, motels, and short-term rentals. While it may have been necessary to build tourism economies decades ago, the local lodging tax preemption has not been re-examined by the legislature since its inception. Cities are advocating for flexibility so they can shift toward maintaining tourism economies and responding to the burdens that come with them. A prime example is the Newport Police Department, community right next door to me. They have a 28-person department for 10,000 people. That may sound like overkill, but when you look at the numbers that come in during the summer months, Newport swells to around 40,000 people, and on any given summer weekend, that number can go up to 50,000 people. So they have a need, a desperate need for safety for all the tourists that come and enjoy the wonderful Central Oregon coast. Under current restrictions and existing definitions of tourism promotion and tourism-related facilities only leave local jurisdiction so much leeway to respond to those strains. What cities need is to be allowed to fund tourism-impacted services like public safety in Newport, community infrastructure with their lodging tax revenues under the 70% of restricted funds. Tourists want to experience communities and everything it has to offer. City residents bear the burden of maintaining and operating things that directly benefit tourists, like public amenities such as public restrooms, public parking lots, but also things that are primarily funded by and for community members like public safety. Newport's not alone. Lincoln City is in the same boat. Critical infrastructures, parks, and trails. When you have a huge rush of tourists who come over into a community for a weekend and that population doubles, okay, for some communities, as I mentioned, that can quintuple. The numbers become overwhelming to a city's infrastructure. For some communities, roads wear out a lot faster. Water systems are strained. Tourists come to parks because they have children. Flexibility is especially critical in cities that have ridiculously low, or as in the case of Depot Bay, no property taxes. Depot Bay runs on fees and that 30%. That is what they run their city on. They just went out this last year and authorized $400,000 to contract with the Sheriff's Department for law enforcement coverage. That money had to come out of that 30%. So they had to cut a few other things to get to that, to make sure that locals and the tourists that visit remain safe. Those ridiculously low property tax rates, and then they rely more heavily on TLT. The additional flexibility will benefit private businesses like hotels and restaurants that rely on tourism. If local jurisdictions can better maintain and enhance necessary infrastructure and provide the services and amenities necessary to support tourism, in turn, it will make our communities even more desirable for visitors, and they will come back repeatedly. Seems like a win for everyone involved. And I want to make sure that we are clear on this. We are talking about flexibility. If a city wants to spend that 70% on the advertising, on building those type of infrastructure, great. I'm happy for you. But there are a lot of cities that need this flexibility to be able to keep providing these services to the people that they serve during tourist season. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Cross. The League of Oregon Cities is committed to working with legislator to address challenges and clarify existing laws, including ORS 195-530, often referred to as House Bill 3115. This statute governs how cities can regulate camping on public property, including time, place, and manner restrictions necessary to maintain public safety and livability. The LOC's proposed amendments to House Bill 3115 are not intended to criminalize homelessness, but rather we aim to address the critical concerns about clarity and consistency in the law. Objectively reasonable is subject to varying interpretations by cities and localities, resulting in a patchwork of regulations that can lead to confusion for all the community members, including those experiencing homelessness. As Oregon continues to expand its shelter capacity and increase affordable housing stock, we must also ensure that local governments can manage public spaces effectively while respecting the rights and dignity of all individuals. The LOC's goal is to work with the legislature to clarify the statute in a way that balances the need for community safety and livability with compassion for the unhoused Oregonians. We recognize the importance of addressing the homelessness crisis comprehensively, and that includes supporting measures to increase funding for shelters, wraparound services, and housing developments while fostering collaborations among stakeholders. Many cities have already taken the lead in creating and maintaining homelessness services while continue these efforts with the support of the state. The LOC urges the legislator to support our efforts to refine House Bill 3115. By doing so, we can provide clearer guidance for local governments, reduce the risk of litigation, and promote equitable, humane policies across Oregon. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mayor Carol McInnes from the city of Fossil. Oregon has passed 3 transportation packages in the last 25 years, with the most significant investment taking place in 2017 with a $5.3 billion package. Before the 2017 session, the legislature held statewide listening tours where the public emphasized the need for a comprehensive multimodal transportation package. With 13 tour stops in Oregon in 2024, members of the Joint Committee on Transportation heard loud and clear that Oregonians need more transportation investments and expect a package that is back to the basics and focuses on fixing funding challenges while investing in the entire transportation system. City streets account for 11,300 lane miles, and with 70% of the state's population residing in cities, these streets are faced with the heaviest use. The legislature must prioritize and make sure revenue sharing from Oregon transportation-related fees and taxes remains intact. The shared revenue formula, known as 50-30-20, is vital for the 2025 package and the local governments that receive stable funding. We must invest in Oregon's transportation infrastructure beyond ODOT's facilities. Communities like Fossil, with populations less than 500, depend on their share of the state highway fund for street maintenance. Our annual distribution is around $15,000, which limits our capabilities. But that distribution to Fossil is every bit as important as it is to larger cities. The Small City Allotment Program, added in 2017, is essential for cities under 5,000 in population, representing 2/3 of the league's membership. With 5 million available for awards of up to $250,000 per project, this program has benefited Fossil through 6 grant awards out of 13 applications. Out of 13 applications, funding vital transportation projects in our community. Under this Small City Allotment Program, ODOT received applications for over $17 million in 2024, demonstrating its significance. Increasing this funding is essential for Fossil and the 160 cities that qualify. I want to close with some data that is important to this subject. In 2024 member surveys, key findings included 40% of city streets are in poor or very poor condition, underscoring the need for a robust transportation package. The LOC estimates that a $633 million annual funding gap for operations and maintenance to achieve fair road conditions. Transportation investment is a top priority across all cities in Oregon. There is recognition that continued investment in Oregon's transportation system will benefit economic development, provide communities with investments that save lives, and investment in transportation infrastructure can often be a key factor for future housing projects. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor, for your comments. We'll now begin the question and answer segment of those questions that were pre-submitted. Kevin Toon, our League of Oregon Cities Communication Director, will read the first question submitted. I'll now ask the Board of Directors, mayors to join me here at the podium.
Okay, first question we had pre-submitted was from Peter Wong, who's also here. So Peter, if I don't encapsulate your email, make sure I get this correct. The first question he submitted was, what are your transportation preferences from the 2025 legislature?
Meryl, would you like to take that?
Thank you for that question. It's hard to pick a preference because the needs are significant. Each community may have different priorities for transportation versus water-related projects. Creating a stable investment should balance both.
Okay, and Peter's second question. Before we get to that question, I do want to tell our folks on Zoom, we have, I think, 10 media outlets who are on Zoom. If you do have a question you want to ask of our panelists, please put it in the chat and I will read it here in the room so everyone can hear it. Second question on transportation. Are there any new proposals to pay for other infrastructure improvements, i.e. water and sewer lines, beyond what lawmakers did in 2024?
I'm going to defer that question to our legislative director, Jim McCauley, so he can provide clarification on that. Yes.
So thanks for the question, Peter. I think what we're after at this point in time is, as you know, transportation itself has its own fee structure, tax system, and things of that nature that really help form the core revenue to be able to provide, again, for added infrastructure. The water, however, lacks that piece. There is really no set structure for at the state level other than what they allocate out of general fund allocations. So we'll, of course, be advocating for increased general fund allocations. Last year, they had $100 million towards the program. It'd be great to be able to see that type of stability go forward in the future.
Questions in the room? I can use the microphone here. Julia, hold on.
Julia Shumway with the Oregon Capital Chronicle. I was hoping you can share a little more specifics about what kind of refinements the League of Cities is looking for when it comes to HB 3115.
Thank you. Yes, the league is asking for clarity in the House Bill 3115. We have a lot of cities that are doing kind of a patchwork group of solutions, and that can put cities into potential litigation. We're not all necessarily on the same page. And so really having the clarity is what we're looking for right now. I do have our legislative director here as well that can answer any more technical questions if you want to further expand on that. So Mr. McCauley? Oh, thank you. Alexandra?
Good morning, Alexandra Ring, she, her. I am the housing and land use lobbyist for the League of Oregon Cities. So in terms of kind of what refinements we're looking at, it kind of falls into two categories. The first is going to be looking kind of within the definition of objectively reasonable. That's very hard to define, hard to narrow down, especially in statute. So we're going to be looking at, areas of safe harbor. I think there's continued and ongoing discussions about what exactly those areas are, but it's gonna, the typical areas that cities regulate, parks, sidewalks, floodplains, environmentally sensitive areas where, we can all kind of come to an agreement that that is probably an objectively reasonable definition. And then second is going to be looking at, more of the legal risk side of things and looking at, sorry to get technical, Section 6 of the statute. And there's a 90-day notice requirement, but in that 90-day notice requirement from the plaintiff, when they're, suing a city for not meeting the definition of objectively reasonable, they don't have to say what about their ordinance does not meet the definition, which has led to some challenges in terms of, opportunity to cure and kind of an opportunity to bring people to the table and have some mediation prior to entering court.
Other questions in the room? Other questions on Zoom? Not seeing anything? Yep, go ahead, Peter. Let me give you the microphone. Hold on.
I have a follow-up to the question on funding for infrastructure other than transportation. I realize transportation has usually been a separate bailiwick. We'll see what happens in the session on that. But on the other hand, I know there's no dedicated fund for water and sewer improvements, but shouldn't maybe, given that this is going to be a continuing need, not only for developing housing, but other factors, that maybe there should be some thinking about doing something other than the legislature handing out money every 2 years.
Okay. Mayor Keeler.
There may be a point where to money. And the other thing is, I don't know if that's seen as stable. I don't consider that stable when you have to depend on the legislature every 2 years to dole out money.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I agree. I don't think coming back and asking every year for specific projects is sustainable. So what we've got a good start on is recognizing the need. What we need is programmatic investment. So we're starting to see some of our legislators interested in things like revolving loan funds, looking at tax increment financing, looking at ways to create a sustainable program. We want to keep asking for that because you're absolutely right. We've historically seen federal investment in things like sewer and wastewater and water. It was there 50 years ago. It is not there now. And cities cannot bear the cost of that if we want to have the housing and the development that we need. So that's exactly right. And that's exactly what I think we should be focusing on.
All right.
Any other questions? Not seeing anything on Zoom, so I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to take a moment and say thank you all for attending today, those in person and also in line. And thank you to Mayor Keebler, Mayor Cross, and Mayor McInnes. I appreciate the work that you do on behalf of the respective cities and the entire local government community here in Oregon. And this now concludes our media briefing, and thank you all for attending.